everyone. Welcome back to the CCO Follow podcast. Today we have Esther Vung and Megan Cahey. Esther is a youth student here. She goes to Tumwater High School, and Megan has been on the podcast before as a young adult, but now she's an intern here as well, so that's really cool. Today we're excited because we get to talk about living on mission as a youth. And it's not necessarily just for the youth today. Travis, maybe you want to explain what we mean by that.
Yeah, like if you remember back maybe a month and a half ago, when we were doing our parenting episodes, we would emphasize different age categories. But even if you didn't have kids in those age categories, we wanted those episodes to be beneficial for the parents, but also for those in our church community and family. Because the reality is that whether or not you have a student who is a youth right now, whether or not you are a youth right now, you are involved in this church community who have youth as a part of it. And like we always tell the youth group, you are not the church of tomorrow, you're the church of today.
Yep.
And so we want to be able to encourage the church of today. So whether you are, 10 and you want to encourage those who are older than you, whether you're 50, you want to encourage those younger than you, they just have unique situations, being at school and trying to live on mission there, being under teachers or with classmates, doing sports and other stuff. So often we talk about what it's like to live on mission as an adult, but it is different as a kid.
Totally.
Not that the message has changed, not that even in some ways a lot of the tactics you would use to live on mission, but just the situation is different.
Yeah.
And it's good for all ages to realize what situation they're in so you can best encourage them, best equip them, and also for those who are in that situation, just be encouraged of I'm not alone.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so kind of just starting right into that, what is living on mission to you like? What is it like as a youth to live on mission?
Mm-hmm. For me, I feel like it's just exemplifying, as you read about in the Bible, how God walked through those times, how he interacted with people, how he treated people. It's doing that, but in a different time. Like you were saying about situations, it's same context, same meaning in a different situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're doing all the things Jesus would do, preaching how he would preach, but you're doing it in the situation you're currently in.
Yeah.
Which really applies not just to different stages of life, but all the different facets, whether it be school or soccer.
Yeah.
You just went to homecoming last night. Just all the different areas of life. And really that's kind of called the Christian.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. And Megan, for you, being kind of, you're out of high school and now you're kind of entering into the world, it still looks a little bit different. What's been the mix for you of living on mission?
It's really interesting because not only am I in a different stage, but I'm also watching your stage, Esther's stage, because I work with the high school as a youth leader, and I have 3 years now. Yeah, you're a junior and you're in my group. Anyway, and when they're saying I'm really struggling with talking to this teacher, stuff like that, sometimes it's dude, I'm totally struggling talking to my boss, you know?
Yeah.
Or they're I don't really know how to approach this subject because technically I actually can't talk about religion in this class or something like that. It's really discouraged at school, and I'm dude, I'm at the exact same place at my workplace, you know? So for me, I think living missionally is taking the opportunity when they come, and also really, I totally agree with what you said about it's the same practice but in different context. But it's also just Jesus was an example. Yeah. So in every situation, you're not walking and be I just can't live missionally here because I technically can't share the gospel very easily because they have some rule or something like that. But you're still showing through your example and the way that Jesus did, because that's just as important sometimes.
Yeah. And it actually makes me ask a question here is you guys are young and there's a lot of things to do for young people. Why?
No way.
No, really. Why
There's so
live?
many options. The world is your oyster.
Yeah. Why live life on mission? Why is that important to you?
Souls are important. At the end of the day, it's why you're doing is because Jesus commanded us to do it. And if you're following Jesus, you're doing what he commanded you to do. And if you're not doing what Jesus commanded you to do, you're just believing in Jesus. You're not following Jesus. And that's not a Christian, which is unfortunate, but that's the truth of it. Yeah. And when he said, go out to all nations and make disciples, that's including your own. It's not just including Romania. Me and Esther went on a missions trip to Romania this summer, which was fantastic. But if we're not going to be having the same practice that we had in Romania in our own home, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
For me, like why I feel like I should do it is because I kind of received that from other people as like growing up in the church. I'd see people living on mission and I was able to experience that. And now that I have that, it's like, why not, if I can live on mission, give that to other people around me and like just share what I have with other people and not just keep it to myself or like hide it from the world and stuff. You want to give that joy to other people around you. So
Any specific like memories that come to mind when you say that of like people who lived on mission when you were younger, as an example?
A lot of my like 4th and 5th grade teachers or just like teachers within the church would share experiences. Like some of them were teachers at schools and stuff, and so they would share how they're constantly living on mission in their life, not at the church, like not in a church context, but living outside of the church and sharing what they know from the church.
It's a good reminder that like discipleship is not like that one sermon you taught, that one message. It was the life that was demonstrated and experienced.
I mean, and that's exactly what you were talking about in the very beginning is that's a way for, like when we think about living on mission as a youth, like that's also a way for us to interact with the youth. Like I think of Tom Alonji we've had on a couple times, and I work with Tom in the high school as a tennis coach, and we're not allowed to be explicitly talking about Jesus, but we're able to, just by our witness, and if they ask us questions, we're able to kind of answer those. And so that's our way of being missional minded by reaching those youths. And it's cool to see for you. I mean, you're just explaining it right there. Like that made a difference in my life. And so it is an encouragement to hear that.
Yeah. I think a lot of like what we're so far dancing around is that idea that like I feel like sometimes when we talk about living on mission, it's like forcing opportunities is what people have in their head. It's like, oh, you shared the gospel with your classmate. Oh, you explicitly stood up for the truth in this context. When really it's all those little micro things that build up to other opportunities. That like you may not get the opportunity to, say, no, this is true in the middle of your class, or to share the gospel in the middle of your class. But all your classmates see how you act, and it's conversations outside of the class, it's conversations in between the hallways, it's conversations before and after school, and those were only possible because of all the other micro interactions. And sometimes we discount those things.
Absolutely.
So Travis, you were in high school, and what year did you graduate? Dating yourself here.
In 2009.
Wow. I was 8 years old.
I was 2.
Oh,
Wow. And you went to Capital High
So I got married
School
when you were 4.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. You are old.
That's
Did
terrifying.
you fight in the Second World War too?
I absolutely fought in Vietnam, and
Wow.
Okay.
Did you meet Lincoln? Sorry. Let's talk about how Travis is old, Mark.
So you went to Capital High School, and you graduated in 2009. I went to Capital High School. I graduated in 2015. You went...
I was homeschooled.
Homeschooled?
Okay, no. I went to SBSCC.
Okay.
I got my associates there. So
And
I
your last 2
graduated in
years.
2020.
2020.
And I only, that
and
was
you're
the only.
in the middle of high school.
Yeah, junior year, I'll graduate 2025.
Yeah, wow. At Tumwater. So I'm curious. This is just for my curiosity here. What was it like? I mean, well, I should ask. Were you living on mission in high school? I would guess. What was it like for you back in the early aughts? Is that what they say?
The early aughts? No one says that.
Okay.
Never
The
heard
early
that one.
2000s.
Okay.
But so I can't get off that. So I'd say it was a lot of, that's when evolution was really being pushed in schools.
Yeah.
I'm sure they still teach it in schools, but it was like I remember, I don't even know if I should call them friends, but friends being like, see, your religion's stupid because of this. Ugh. And like, I remember it was so weird. I remember like there being a class where they taught stuff in evolution, and I got super interested. So I started studying, and I went to the teacher. I'm like, this book is legitimately outdated. Like, whether you not believe in evolution or not, some of the things they're saying is actually completely false. Yeah. And they were just like, oh, well, too bad. And it was so weird. It was such a weird,
That's outrageous.
Outrageous.
It is.
But I'd say my strongest memories as far as living on mission with people is, accepting a lot of people where they're at, I have a very there was multiple friends who I feel like I got to impact along the way, but there's one in particular that I'll never forget because it was so dramatic, where we had our friend group, and I was the only Christian in that group. There's probably like 8 of us who would oftentimes hang out during lunch, stuff like that. And one of us came out as gay during one of our lunch periods, and everyone else was very like encouraging of it, and all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I just making sure you know where I stand. Like, I believe that's wrong. And here's why I believe it's wrong. And all the other friends got super angry at me. Like, we stayed friends, but they were just like, and this one friend, the one who came out, was completely blown away that I'd be willing to be honest with him, but also still be like, but I want to stay friends.
Right.
And so we stayed friends. He ended up transferring to a different school because his parents freaked out about, his coming out and stuff like that. And years later, like 6 years later, we happened to be back visiting from Florida, and I ran into him at a different high school graduation. We were going for some other people that we knew, and he was there. And he was like, oh my gosh, can we like meet up for coffee? I'm like, absolutely.
That's
and
crazy.
he was like, so I ended up accepting Jesus.
Oh my gosh.
And he was like, I've just never forgot how you treated me, and how like, I knew what you were like before you found out I was gay. I knew what you were like when you found out. And we lost contact because his parents basically cut off contact from everyone at that school. And he's like, but it was a couple years later that I just realized, like, Jesus is real.
Yeah.
This is true.
Like, you
He's
never
like,
stopped loving him, but you didn't affirm.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's still going to be my struggle for life, but I'm not, I don't identify as gay. I don't give into that,
Good.
sin.
Yeah.
And this is, and part of it was because of how I was able to handle that. Like, I'd like to think I was part of that story, but it wasn't like, just cutting him off and getting upset and stuff like that. So that for me, there was many stories like that where it's just like, it was the micro interactions.
Yeah.
It's not like I really got to
Yeah.
preach at him or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
In fact, he left my life.
Yeah.
Right.
That's also
But-
such
But
an
that could have started something, planted something where he's like,
Yeah.
why did
Ultimately-
he act that way? And
Ultimately,
Yeah.
I feel like living on mission, especially as a youth, deals so much with just having open hand of letting God put people in your life for a season and then removing people in life for a season.
Yeah.
Because even the most interactions you'll have during this season of your life, like specifically Esther, because you're still in high school, after 4 years, so many of the people you'll never interact
So
with again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you living on
Yeah.
mission really is a touch point in that person's life for God to do something else for
Yeah.
years to come.
Esther, what is it like for you now? Like, contrasting from, then
Super
to now.
old to
Is
super
it
young.
the same?
So like you were saying about evolution, I feel like that's not as like
people don't even care anymore.
relevant anymore. People are like, okay, like they know both sides.
Yeah.
And neither is taught more than the other. But with like the LGBTQ community,
that's
that kind of
massive.
stuff, huge. Like
Yeah.
especially at Tumwater, it's not as bad. I feel like there's a pretty solid like Christian group there. But like you hear about other schools, you hear about even just like some people, like I'm in theater at Tumwater, and that's just a huge place for that kind of community and stuff.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not, I'm never like, oh my gosh, like I can't be friends with you. Like that's awful. Like why do you do that to yourself? It's just knowing that I disagree with that, but I still choose to love them.
Yeah.
And like some of those people that I've met are some of the nicest people I've ever met. And they're so kind and they're so loving. It's just our viewpoints don't align.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I can just point out and be like, okay, we can't be friends because of that. It's something that I can show my beliefs, they can show theirs, and we can agree to disagree in some ways. And then I'm still openly being a witness in that scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's something that's super prevalent. And then other than that, I feel like that's the big one right now. And then just for me specifically, there's so many like cliques in high school. And that's just, and I feel like that's kind of always been a thing in high school. But specifically at Tumwater being like a super athletic school, that happens a lot. And there's just always that difference. And then as like a Christian, I want to stand out, and I'm friends with both sides. I'm never just hanging out with the athletes. I'm never just hanging out with the people in my class.
Yeah.
It's openly being a part of everything and witnessing in every group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not like saying one's less than or whatever, and not preaching to that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made a really good point where you said just to kind of stand out and be different. Like, and that's what you were doing. I think that's like when I think back to, my high school experience and being kind of younger, it was very much what you're saying is like the people who stood out to me were the ones that never really like were only stuck to a particular group.
Yes, yeah.
They were kind of going around. Everybody was like, wow, I'm friends with all of you guys. And,
Yeah.
and then those people look, and what was funny to me, I mean, it's not funny now, but I'm seeing it as like, those are the people that were, living out what it meant to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And they would invite you to church and stuff. And so it's just cool to see that, like, as we live on mission, even as adults, just by being different is going to, like, people are going to notice that, and they have questions, and they're going to, then if they don't, they're going to notice, like you, is like, wow, Travis was a Christian, and, that guy that you're talking about, when he gave his life to Jesus, I'm sure he thought, I'm not turned away by Christianity because I know that, one of my old friends was a Christian, and he didn't agree with it, and now I understand that, but he also didn't shun me or hate me or do all these different things. And I think that's just so that's the heart of Christ, right? Like Jesus went to all these different places that nobody else would go. And so that's just by living different is really important. So I appreciate you saying that.
Something with your story too that really stood out is that you didn't hesitate to tell him the truth, even in a circle of people. And that's what Jesus did. Then the day he told everyone the truth. And sometimes, like, especially right now, you all gonna be like, people are gonna shun you and stuff like that. And you're like, well, how am I gonna be a witnessing tool if I'm not their friend? And it's like, you told them the truth, and that's what matters. Because at the end of the day, I think that that's really important, and I think that sometimes we kind of shy away from it or try to skirt around it. But it's like, gotta tell the truth, gotta tell the absolute truth. Let's not water it down. And it's hard because no one wants to be told the worst, because it happens.
Well, and I think something that maybe non-high schoolers, like older than high school adults, don't appreciate with that reality, because that was hard saying that to a group of 8 of my friends. But I think about high schoolers today, if they stand up for a truth in some way, there's no telling exactly if they're going to be recorded, thrown online, and then ridiculed by thousands of people they don't even know. And that's always kind of, I'm sure, I don't know if that's in the back of your mind, Esther, I'd be curious, but I know it's in the back of some people's minds that it's just like anything you do could suddenly become this national thing. And it might be the right thing. It might be the thing that everyone would say, like in our context, you should do that. That's right. But how many of us would do that if we knew that was like the next thing that was going to happen, is that your life was going to be just on stage for literally everyone to see, for you, that you maybe said it slightly wrong and people freak out on both sides, or it's taken out of context, or like, does that ever cross your mind as you're living
Shockingly,
life?
no.
That's good. I hope it doesn't. Like, I'm so sorry.
Travis is playing this in every youth's mind.
I know. Don't listen to this.
No, I never did think about that, but now that I think about it, I can. Now that I think about it, but I can see that now that I can think of it, and like.
And I think social media is huge.
Yeah.
Like what you put on social media is permanent. So
buy stock at Starbucks. It's not too late. It's growing bigger.
It's not even necessarily others, like videotaping you. It's more of like you doing it to yourself. And there's a witness that we have to have as Christians on social media even too. And so I was curious, just with sports in general, Esther, because I know that you're an athlete. For me, it was very cliquey in high school, going through, but there was also this like mob mentality, where if even just like the popular crowd, like if it was just like 3 or 4 people thought something or said something, it would go out the whole school, and then they'd all agree with it. And so, but on the other end of that, if you were just the one that they decided to disagree with, it was like,
screwed.
You're out, like you're cast out, and so that was especially hard for me as like an athlete, because I played tennis and I played soccer, and those groups in themselves it was absolutely like you either thought one thing as the whole, and if you didn't think that, you were just kind of the excess. And what is it like for you just being at Tumwater?
For me, so on the soccer team, I feel like it gets very cliquey between teams. So like varsity, JV, C team. I remember my sister's freshman year, she was on JV, or actually it was her sophomore year. She was on JV. One of her friends was on varsity, and they completely stopped talking during the whole season.
Wow.
And it was just, you're not on this team, you're not with me, we're not talking during this time. And I feel like it can go the opposite way too. Like, you're not talking to this person and then you're on the same team. Okay, we'll be friends now. And it's just so, it's cliquey, and it's just not ethical or anything. Like, it's just for the moment.
It's very shallow then too.
Yeah. And then and then even after season, it'll just sometimes fade, and like that next season comes, oh, you're best friends again.
So how do you get through that, when you're trying to be different and reach people and just build relationships with people? How do you personally break through that?
For me, I always like to maintain like specific friends that I know will build me up, that I have whatever team they're on. I make sure that I'm always like hanging out with them or talking to them, asking how their game went, and then also playing in my game, and just surrounding yourself with that. And then people can see that you're like, oh, like, why are you talking to C team? Like, they're literally C team, you're on varsity, whatever. And you're like, well, they're my friends. Like, it doesn't change because they're on a different team. It doesn't change because they're on a different level or like whatever. You're still wanting to be a part of their life, and you still want to witness to them no matter where they are.
I'm sure that's always been a certain divide of like, oh, A team and B team and C team. But I wonder if part of it's also exacerbated by like social media and just like how there's unlimited amount of people that you can be in touch with and are kind of expected to be in touch with. And so you simply don't have time to build deeper relationships. So the easiest way is just, well, who am I supposed to be, quote unquote, supposed to be friends with right now, because I don't have time for anything more than that. And I'm just going to keep going from one to another to another.
You also mentioned something too that I think was really important, is you said that you kind of would make sure that you were, making friends or building relationships with people that also could do the same for you. And I think, like, man, I don't even hear that
as adults.
Like, but it's so true. It's like, it's knowing that we're not the, like, it's what Tom says with the outlet. Like, if we're not being poured in or we're not being encouraged, like, we're gonna fail because we're just on our own and we're not meant to be outside of community. And so, like, seeking out a community to also be part of community, I love that. I wish that we talked more about that.
The I guess one thing that I was thinking about when you mentioned the mob mentality, and I think that helps sway people's directions and stuff like that. I think in high school it's especially prevalent. Just saying this for some outside perspective for people who are in it, but also for some empathy from adults who aren't anymore. There's it's such an insecure time. And so to be able to latch on to anything at any time is like a safety net. It's like a life raft. And so being able to be like, oh, everyone's going this way, I'll jump on because then I'm part of something. Then I know I'm secure. Then I know I'm not going to be alone. And it's just easy. Whether that thing you're jumping on is good or bad, it's safe. At least it feels safe to you.
It's comfortable.
In those situations is that it's the most vulnerable thing is being by yourself. So you will latch onto a group of people and you're hang out with them and you're do everything with them. People that you don't even really like. I cannot tell you how many times I was in a group of people that I was like sitting there and I was like, I don't think anything you just said was funny. And it's not, and it wasn't like they were just people that I loved them because they were my brothers and sisters in Christ, or they were just souls and I loved them. But I didn't really like them. And reality is that you will latch on and you'll stay with people because you're just scared to be alone, because that's really vulnerable in those situations. It's awkward and everyone stares at you too. Like the amount of, there's not a ton of social etiquette in high school, and it's just a really uncomfortable time and people aren't very good at making everyone feel comfortable. So
and some people aren't even, you have to be proactive to do that too. And so in high school, no one cares about that. They're just trying to barely make it themselves emotionally. So who's going to reach out to you? Nobody. No, absolutely. I think another empathy thing, as well as like encouragement for high schoolers, is that around that same idea, your brain's still developing. And we've all heard like, your brain develops fully when you're like 24, 25, 26. But one of the things that develops when that happens is you actually, everything younger than that, you prioritize things you're told over things you've experienced, as far as how you think through issues, how you think through daily moments how you think through, you know, a mob mentality of people going one direction or another.
Yeah.
And so part of the problem is that you're fed all these lies and things like that, and it overrides your experience because you're at this age where it naturally happens that way.
Yeah.
Where once you reach that kind of age where your brain's fully developed, you start relying more on your experiences to essentially comfort you and tell you like, this is going to be okay. You can get through this.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'd encourage high schoolers, but also the, you know, those who are not in high school anymore to have empathy for, is just keep filling your mind with truth.
Yeah.
That like all
That's
those
good.
things
Yeah.
where it's like, when that mob mentality happens, know what verses you can rely on to be like, this is what's actually true, and this is how I should actually follow Jesus. Know the things that, you know, lead you down the path of righteousness, and don't rely on what you feel like in the moment, because what you feel like is a lie.
And being brave and stepping out, and if it requires you to go against the mob mentality, to do that in a way that's, you know, loving but stands out, and trusting that the Lord's gonna continue to use you and guide you and stuff.
Another thing too with the brain thing is that during that time of your life, the fear part of your brain is actually more active than the logical part too.
Gotta survive.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also there's just there's a huge thing right now is that people are forgetting their authority of identity is God.
Yeah.
So when other people think of them in a bad way, they start to really adopt that and believe it.
Yeah.
And they forget of like, no, my social group is not the authority
Yeah.
in my life. So
Yeah.
they can't say who I am. Only God can say that.
Right.
I'm sure this issue is pervasive in different areas of life. So I'm just curious if you gave the example of sports, and but for those who aren't part of sports, or for just adults to have a bigger perspective of like other areas of life, are there any other areas where you see just extreme looseness of friendships, extreme hierarchy of just like you should hang out with these people, not those people, within school, or just within like other things that you do, just, you know, in your age?
Academically, it happens too. For more like that person's smart, you should go sit next to them, like they'll tell you the answers.
Yeah.
Or that person's like, don't sit next to them, you won't get anything done in class. Or like this person, you're gonna have to do all the work because they won't do anything.
Yeah.
So it happens within the classroom, and I'm sure within jobs too. Like, you don't want to be paired with this person because they'll do this.
Yeah.
And like having the mentality of, oh, I'll pair up with this person because I can help them with this.
Yeah.
Instead of switching it on yourself.
Yeah.
How can you help them? How can you serve them to make them better? Instead of focusing on how, like, your selfishness and how you want to, like, succeed in a certain thing.
Yeah.
And just having the mentality to help instead of gain.
Yeah.
Man, Esther is blowing my mind. I wish I was this way as a youth. I confess I was not this way in high school. I was very much just survive and get through. And I look back and I like, there's a certain part of me that's like bummed because I feel like I wasted some time. But it's so wonderful hearing you know, others before self. I mean, that's, it's like so basic and so simple. And it's something that like we can do even as adults and now.
Yeah.
And, and I just think, you know, in high school, seeking out those people that like, hey, I'm gonna be the person that people are gonna to want to come to. I'm gonna be that type. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, I mean, even just the simple idea of like, oh, sit by that person because you'll get better grades. I mean, that's general standard. Not even from youth, but like from parents of like, hey, you want to get I want you to learn. You're here to learn.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying if you desire that for your kid, that's wrong. But that does treat people like a consumption.
Yeah.
That does treat people like something to, you know, benefit yourself. And that's never how Jesus treated people.
Yeah.
That's,
And another thing with the identity thing, if you're going to be that kid that no one wants to sit next to because you distract them, the more and more that people say that and treat you like that, the more and more you're going to
lean into it.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, this is me. This is my identity.
Yeah.
And also exactly what you're saying is like, how can I help other people versus them helping me?
Yeah.
Because what did Jesus do?
Yeah.
You know, he helped other people.
Do you ever find yourself trying to speak those kind of like truths over people at school? Like, not in a weird way, but like kind of like you were saying, like if you're told this often enough, like do you ever tell people like, I believe that, you know, you don't have to be all spiritual about it, but like I believe, you know, you're essentially made in the image of God, that you can grow and be made different and stuff like that. Like, do you ever, I don't know, is that ever a conversation that you have with people?
I feel like it's never that like deep, like in the moment, and you're like, oh,
let's sit down.
Jesus is your father, like you're his child or whatever, but which is true, but it's more the like little things. I feel like in high school, like just friends around me, are constantly bringing themselves down, and they do so in a joking manner.
Yeah.
And they're like,
Self-deprecation is an easy
oh my
joke.
gosh, I'm
Yeah.
so
I
bad at
hate
this
it.
subject. Like, I'm terrible. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not smart at all or
Yeah.
whatever. And just saying something like, no, like, you're good at doing this. You're good at this, and you can help me here, and I can help
Yeah.
you there. And just lifting them up in the little things slowly builds that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because for me, I'm a huge fan of, like, I love hearing people praise me, which sounds really bad. I know.
I mean, who does it though?
Yeah.
You're doing
it
great, by the way.
builds you
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
it builds you up, and that's the same for others, like saying that, and then vice versa. If you're
Yeah.
doing the opposite, it degrades them, it brings
Yeah.
them down.
Tears them
Yeah.
down.
So you can do the opposite and build them up and make them stronger in this way, and it's just like little things, like it's the micro
Yeah.
little things that make the difference. And
Yeah.
Yeah. A little note on degrading yourself too is that I think I just really hate it. I think it's a terrible practice. I think it's not biblical at all. But I think one of the things is that when people are degrading themselves, they're normally fishing. They're fishing for they're fishing
If
for
it's like a subconscious too.
yeah,
then
and
on
I
that
think
same
sometimes
level.
because they really do just like it. I think that I do this myself. That I kind of be like, you're just fishing for compliments. But I think the root of that is that there's a really deep insecurity, and
Yeah.
they are really hungry for truth.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you can go, no, like if a girl's like, oh my gosh, I look so ugly today, you know, it's not just say, no, you're so beautiful. You know, it's not just that. I mean, I do think you should say that.
Yeah.
But I think it's more than just saying like, you know, I hear that you're not feeling great today, or I hear that you're saying something about yourself that's just simply not true. And you can be bad at math, but that does not mean you're dumb. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
going beyond to the deeper truth of like, you're made in the image of God, so
Yeah.
you're a good creation. You can be bad at math. You can even, I'm not saying acknowledge that they're bad at math, but don't lie to people
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
say like, oh no, you're great at this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just go to the deeper truth of like, you're made in the image of God, and you're a good creation declared by the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and that their value doesn't come from being good at math or not.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like that image thing you were saying. You know, there's a saying that people's words aren't enough to keep us afloat, but they can tear us down.
Yeah.
But even all the most kind, you know, oh, you're beautiful, whatever.
Yeah.
The reality
Yes,
is that
queen.
they will actually have a bad hair day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it will
Yes.
happen.
Yeah.
And not saying that their beauty's gone, but like in reality, it's like those like kind of things that just puff us up. They're
Yeah.
not they're not sustainable on their own.
Yeah. It's,
And so it's like-
not eternal truth.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so it's,
Yeah.
you know, we emphasize not the, oh, you're beautiful, and no, don't listen to them. We're emphasizing you're made in the image of God, and He says that He loves you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're the ugliest person on earth.
Yeah.
Like, and so just emphasizing the deeper truth that's
Yeah.
far more important, you know,
Yeah.
and being
Yeah.
known as a person who's encouraging in that way.
Because, like, weird example, if a girl says, hey, do I stink right now? I'm going to tell them if they do or don't. Okay? That is a really simple, weird thing, but don't lie to people.
Being known as someone who's honest is very important.
Yes,
Yeah.
and be like, yeah, girl, you need some deodorant right now. And that's okay to say.
And then you offer the deodorant.
And then you offer the deodorant. And then you also say, yeah, it's a normal human function. And you listen.
Normal human
And that's okay that you stink right now. Acknowledging, like, it's okay if you're not good at things. You know, like, I hear that you're struggling in math right now, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to pray for you
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that goes with like how we can't let worldly aspects define who you are.
Yeah.
You let like your academics, your athletics, how you perform, how you do this, define how you are as a person.
Yeah.
When the only person who can define you is God.
Yeah.
And He defines you as His child, and that's all you need.
Yeah.
And just knowing that that's the truth and that's the only truth.
Yeah.
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 So with you mentioned in the kind of the beginning, you said there seems to be like a pretty significant, or at least more than not, of Christians that go to school with you. What's it like? Because when I was going to school, I really didn't know that many other Christians. Like everybody that was in my youth group went to different schools. They,
Right.
you know, they were either homeschooled or went to Northwest Christian
Yeah.
or whatnot. And so it felt very isolated where I was. But for you, what is it like having a group? Do you hang out with them? Is it a temptation to just hang out with them and not
Yeah.
reach others? Like, what's that like?
I feel like, well, like I said, there's a strong Christian group. I don't think individually they're all strong Christians. There's some aspects where yeah, they'll say they're a Christian, like this, they'll go to Young Life Group or whatever.
Yeah.
They go to those things and they do it, but they're not living on mission.
Yeah.
So it's finding the specific people that are living on mission like you are.
Yeah.
So like for me, people who go to the church who I can also hang out with at school, those are the people I like to recharge myself with. So those are the people I hang out with when I'm like, okay, like I've been around other people too long. Like this is starting to get to me. You hang out with those people, kind of like strengthen yourself in the word with them.
Yeah.
And then you're able to go out again and go into those friend groups that maybe aren't as strong in their faith.
Yeah.
And just be like, okay, like, hey, I was doing like a Bible study with my friend and we learned this, and just sharing little truths with them along the way that'll help them strengthen. And then they can go do the same.
Yeah.
Do many of those friend groups overlap, or is it pretty much like you have your Christian friends and your non-Christian friends?
In some aspects they do, but like being with athletics and then being also in academic classes,
It kind of depends on
it
just where you're
depends
at.
where-
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense. So much of high school is pre-decided for
Oh,
you
yeah.
in
Yeah.
so
Oh,
many
yeah.
ways.
Like there's
Yeah.
people that were in my graduating class I never once saw.
Yeah.
Never
Yeah.
once.
Yeah.
Never had any class with them.
Yeah.
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 You're like, do this.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular? Sorry, I want to make sure we ask
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
and I wasn't sure where you're going next, so I figured I'll just ask. Is there anything in particular you feel like has been really helpful in equipping you to live on mission, whether it be people or things said, scriptures, things you learned? Like what has been particularly helpful?
For me, which I know this won't be able to be applicable to everyone, but for me, growing up not in a public school was so helpful, because I was surrounded by my parents who were loving and followers of Christ, who were always pushing me towards that and saying, find your own faith, but like, this is good.
Yeah.
This is what will bring you joy. This is what will make you happy. And having that foundation, having that like rock in my life helps me when I'm in like somewhere else where that rock is not present in other people's life. And it's just easier for me to maintain that. And then also like surrounding myself with those friends and being around people who are also like longing to live on mission, longing to tell people about God.
Yeah.
Having that support system and always being able to go back to that is just so helpful. Yeah.
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 Looking back, is there anything you think of when, or anything you've maybe seen in other students in the youth group?
I think, I mean, of course, being grounded in the word daily. I think that is the biggest thing that shows, is that
Yeah.
is being in the word daily really, really, really matters. And I know everyone knows it, but it's still one of the hardest things to be obedient to. I remember high school was 100% the time that I struggled with that the most. And then being encouraged to live missionally, like it was, because I knew the command, you know, but having people encourage me, the biggest one was people who were older than me. Was people who were discipling me, who were really walking alongside my life, who were just loving me. And when I told them about a certain situation, or I told them about where I was, that they were like, okay, now they would speak truth into my life.
Yeah.
You know? And sometimes it was just really little things of like, remember you're the church there, or sometimes it wasn't even anything. It was just the way that they'd look at me.
Yeah.
And I'm not in a judgmental way, but just with so much love and just praying for me. And anyway, to sum that all up, I think the biggest thing was being grounded in the word, because that's what really commands you what to do, and it encourages you. And then also the older people in my life who were discipling me, who were living that example.
Yeah.
I think that when you're around older people who aren't living that example, it's a lot harder to be encouraged by them, because it's like, you're not even doing it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
especially as a young person, because you're like, I'm looking to you as my guidance, as my authority in my life. Like, you are leading me right now. And if they're not doing it themselves, then that's not being a great leader in that moment.
For like kind of both of you, and maybe for you, Arthur, too, like I know for you had Tom. For you guys, you had youth leaders. Were there any other non-youth leader figures that you're like, this person was a great, help to me, inspiration to me? Like, because you're saying adults, but like, how do you even start that relationship? Was it just all youth leaders? Like, you have to, you know what I mean?
For me, because I was homeschooled, it was our youth leaders, because that was the primary example in my life. I had very little interaction throughout my high school years with non-Christians until I went to South Puget Sound Community College. And even during that time is my last year is the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there. And then before that, because I was homeschooled, I hated going to a classroom. I absolutely despised it. So I did as much online school as possible.
I wasn't homeschooled, and I did too, so.
Hate going to a classroom? Okay, I feel less alone. Anyway, so for me, it was the youth leaders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two actually that I can think of right now. One would still be in the church doing theater. Tad Sowers was a huge example for me. And like, he's a great guy, but sometimes I'm scared of him too.
Yeah.
So you're always
Me too.
like,
Scared of
if
you
he's
too.
listening to this. But
We
what-
fear you.
we're scared. What he did was he always, in the plays we did, we would have a day, we sat down, we talked about why we're doing this play. Like, how is this play, like, exemplifying Christ? And, like, when we were doing Christmas plays, it was a lot easier because they were based off of
'Cause
the Christmas
Jesus.
stories. Yeah. Yay. But, like, drama camps was a little harder to pick out, like, how is this applicable to the Christian life? And so he would always just sit us down and make sure we knew why we were doing it and how not to get caught up in the story, but find the other story within it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one that was a huge example to me of how to do it in like daily life. And then another is actually, he wasn't even a Christian. Not my first soccer coach, my third soccer coach. He was a huge example to me because he was always building people up. Like, I feel like I've had such good experiences with coaches, but some people can get a coach that is just downright
terrible.
mean.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
they'll just degrade you.
Yeah.
And they're like, they'll say they're doing it to like build you up and make you better, but
Yeah.
they're literally telling you suck.
Yeah.
They're
That's-
like,
yeah.
you're awful at this. You need to go train for like 6 hours until you're better. But for me, I had a coach that was always like, so you didn't do this exactly right, but here's ways you can fix it, and here's ways I'll help you to get there.
That's what
Yeah.
being a coach is.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, those were two that were super prevalent in my life.
Yeah, I think, I just think back in my life, Tom was a big example of that. He was a coach that was a Christian who did all of those things and, gave me the kind of the spiritual nudge to be like, take your faith seriously, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it too is, it's more than just one particular relationship. It's more than just like a one-on-one type of thing. Like I was being poured into every Sunday at church through, the different people that I interacted with. So like the sound guys at church or the different pastors, my youth pastor. I was encouraged by even family, and so I think it's like there's times where I wish maybe that I got to the point that where I had a relationship with Jesus sooner. But I think probably many of us feel that same way. But it really is, I think about this whole conversation that we've had, like what have we learned here? At least for me, I can say living on mission as a youth is no different than living on mission in general.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the case, the past few things we've covered is I hope that we're getting to a point where people are understanding that, wow, living on mission actually just is like a life thing. It's an everyday life thing. And so, I love your example, Esther, that you were giving, because it's a little like microcosm. High school is like a microcosm of life and the everyday world.
Though in some ways so different. Where
It's-
like
yeah.
you get to leave,
Yes.
don't worry, you're almost done.
Yes.
Yeah.
So close.
But it's very it's super intense.
Yeah.
It's like very intensified. It's 4 years and you're covering a lot.
Yeah.
But if we can live on mission there, it's no different than what it's like.
It's a good training ground.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on and thanks for being here. I love having these conversations because it's not every day that we get to sit down and go through something specific about a topic, because I learned so much. So thank you everyone for listening and watching and joining this conversation with us. And I hope that you guys can have this conversation outside of just listening to this podcast. Like we've said before, these topics that we cover are going to be loaded up on our website as resources. And so, if you have a son or a daughter who is going through high school and maybe they're having a hard time living on mission, this is the podcast for you, and you can find that on our website. So thanks again, and as always, God bless.